Hello again, everybody. This is John with BestPriceNutrition.com. Today I'm here to review the review on multivitamins that everyone's been reading about, specifically the editorial that came out in the Annals of Internal Medicine, which I'm holding here and I'll link below. It's Enough is Enough, Stop Wasting Money on Vitamin and Mineral Supplements. Now, of course, this is met immediately because we sell supplements with, hey, they're biased. Of course, they're going to say X, Y, and Z. But I'm going to give a critical review of it that, as objective as I can be on it. And, we've done a video in the past on vitamins and saying whether or not you need them, which we can also link below so you guys can check that out as well. And you'll find in that video that we do say, listen, if somebody is eating a nutrient-dense diet, they've got all their, T's crossed and I's dotted, yeah, then they probably don't need a multivitamin, quite frankly. However, that doesn't describe a large portion of the population. That was our take in the video. And also, there's no way to be 100% sure that, hey, I've got all that covered, so why not take a multivitamin? They're not expensive, and there's not a detriment to doing so because any vitamins that are dosed higher are water soluble. So those of you who are wondering. So that was the take from that video specifically. Now, in this one here, as I said, the name of the editorial published in the Annals of Internal Medicine is called Enough is Enough, Stop Wasting Money on Vitamin and Mineral Supplements, and it's based on a review of 3 studies that were published in this specific issue of this journal. And kind of with their, anytime I hear enough is enough, stop doing this or that, like that kind of language is kind of antithetical to science, or you hear the debate is over with certain other areas of science. That's antithetical to science. Science is about following truth. So anytime somebody says, you just close the door on something, well, that's just not the way it works in science. So that right there should raise your eyebrow. I went and read some of the articles too that you see in the media, like CBS.com and stuff like that, and the author would, invoke, oh, these doctors are from Johns Hopkins University, this and that. And again, that doesn't mean anything. It sounds impressive, but that doesn't mean that they're right. Some of the silliest things we ever heard of have come out of great institutions, so to speak. So that alone, your skepticism shouldn't stop there. You should ask good questions. So what I did was I went through each study, and I want to run through this with you as quickly as I can to go through. So anyways, aside from the adjective salad of a editorial name we have here, the first study was done with male physicians who were over 65. And the notion, first and foremost, that multivitamins and minerals are a panacea is not something that I've ever said, or some others as well. So I'm not holding it up to multivitamins are the cure-all for everything. So that's first and foremost. I just want to get that out of the way. But this study was done to look at recurring incidents after having myocardial infarction, colloquially known as a heart attack. Okay, so this was looking at individuals who had already had a heart attack, and specifically what they were trying to determine is prevention of recurrent heart attack, stroke, coronary revascularization, hospitalization for angina, or death. So, and what they said was it did not differ amongst participants who received placebo versus who received what they deemed a large dose of vitamins and minerals after, again, having a heart attack. So remember what I said before. I wouldn't say, multivitamins should do this, this, and that in and of themselves without other factors included. But what I find interesting is if you go and look at the actual results of the study and you look at the p-value. Now, what the p-value is, you guys, it's the probability that something happened by chance. You've probably seen it before. And the line in the sand is p equals 0.05. And what that means is that there's a 1 in 20 chance, that it was due to chance, that it was due to randomness, not because of your actual hypothesis, your original hypothesis. So, your null hypothesis is the exact opposite of what you're actually proposing. So, so in this case, it would mean that no relationship exists in terms of prevention of recurrent MI, stroke, the other things that I had mentioned. And they'd say that it was because of chance based upon this, probability factor because it was greater than 0.05. So if it's greater than a 1 in 20 chance that it was due to chance and randomness, not because of what you're actually studying, then they say, oh, results, don't matter. But if you're actually looking at results and you understand that 0.05 is kind of arbitrary, to just draw the line in the sand there and say that's enough is incorrect. So basically what they were saying here is that again, they said that p was greater than 0.05. So, but what they ignored is that there was an 11% reduction in recurring events for those on multivitamins and minerals. They completely ignored that. That's pretty significant to me. Now, it doesn't meet that 0.05, but an 11% reduction in a population that had already had a heart attack of a recurrence of the events I previously mentioned. I think that's significant. Why would that be case closed? Stop wasting your money. I think 11% is a pretty significant thing. So that's why you got to read the studies, guys, not just read the abstracts and not just take it out of whole cloth, or just listen to journalists who are not trained in reading this stuff per se and don't mention it. So I think that's significant. That's just me. Second study that they went over was on male physicians, again, over 65. And these were large populations. I don't have the exact number in front of me. I forgot to include it here, so I apologize. But it was a large population, so sample size is not a limiting factor here. So what they were testing here for is the daily use of, and this is what they called it, a low-potency multivitamin. In this case, it was Centrum Silver. They took it for an average of 8.5 years, and they said that there was no effect on cognitive function in elderly men participating in the study. Now, the method they used to measure cognitive function was 4 repeated cognitive assessments by telephone interview were completed over 12 years. Okay? Now, they do mention the limitation is that the doses of the vitamins may be too low or the population may be too well nourished to benefit from a multivitamin. So, in other words, if you have, like I talked about before, nutrient density already covered, just taking a vitamin on top of that may be more looked at as like an insurance policy as opposed to, you know, shoring up any gaps where there would be deficiencies. If somebody's deficient then, on the other end, and you only give them a low-dose multivitamin, maybe you're not giving them enough of the nutrients to actually realize benefit. You know, there's a critical mass that needs to be reached sometimes. So that's the limitation that was mentioned by them. Now, this ignores other recent double-blind trials that have actually found benefits in cognitive function where folic acid and B12 were high enough to actually yield benefit. And specifically B12 is known to be, in elderly men, something that plays a key role in cognitive function in all people, but especially the elderly. We say that because cognitive function is something that tends to slip. Now, the other studies were done with supplementation of 800 micrograms of folic acid and 500 micrograms of vitamin B12 and 20 milligrams of vitamin B6. And that slowed the rate of brain atrophy in elderly individuals that were suffering from mild cognitive impairment. Now, the amount of B12 in Centrum Silver is 25 micrograms. That's really small. And in the other ones, as I said, it was 100 and 500 micrograms respectively. The other two I'm speaking toward, and I'll post those links below. Now, loss of cognitive function, again, if your B12 is low, there's known to be a correlation there. Now, using vitamin B12 at such a low dose is probably not going to have an effect. And we know for one thing, you need something called intrinsic factor in order to absorb vitamin B12. I recently was going back and forth in a comment with somebody that was helping out in the past, so I actually pulled this one up. I was able to find it. And I explained to him the idea behind sublingual vitamin B12 is for buccal mucosa absorption, when you put it under your tongue, the sublingual, because the idea is that, hey, I want to bypass my GI tract to get it to absorb there. Now, some research says that when you get those high doses of vitamin B12, sometimes 1,000, 2,000 micrograms, that some of it's just going to seep down into your GI tract, and because it's so high, the dose, that you're still going to absorb some of it, even if you're lacking an intrinsic factor in a unique amount. So what I put here is one study I found that compared actual oral versus sublingual vitamin B12. We had 30 subjects were said to have low serum concentrations of cobalamin, vitamin B12. 16 of the 30 were said to be low meat eaters or strict vegetarians, known to be low in B12, and 2 of the 30 had high concentrations of anti-parietal cell antibodies, which would indicate the intrinsic factor deficiency that I speak of. So what they were doing is they were comparing oral versus sublingual, and as I said, those that still were able to absorb it, the dose was so high that it really didn't matter if some of it was being absorbed under your tongue or not. Point is here is that the dose matters with vitamin B12. That's why I mention it here. I probably went on more of a tangent than was necessary, but when you're using a dose that low, it's kind of hard to reach a conclusion. So that was study number 2, and that was based on the cognitive function. Now, the third study was a review of the evidence of the benefit of vitamin and mineral supplements, and specifically it was done on nutrient-sufficient adults for prevention of CVD and cancer, cardiovascular disease and cancer. Now, the research that they cited here in the editorial, it actually found that there was a 7% reduction of cancer incidence in men, but not women. So it's odd that it just happened in men and not women. So I thought that was interesting, a 7% reduction. Again, I don't think that's something I would just throw out and just, stop wasting your money. But that's just me. What do I know? In terms of CVD prevention, they also looked at 2 large studies that failed to find a beneficial event. Now, when we look at those studies in that review, again, this third one here is a review of research. So when I say 3, this third one here is a review where they're looking at previous research, just so it doesn't get confusing for you guys. So in one of the studies, again, they used Centrum Silver, which I mentioned is low dose. And in the other one, there were 5 nutrients given. They gave zinc, vitamin C, vitamin E, selenium, and beta-carotene. In both of the studies, the zinc wasn't balanced out with copper. Zinc and copper have a relationship such that you have to have, with minerals, you can't just go mega dosing one because they all affect each other. Okay, you have to balance that out. That's why I always tell people it's never a good idea to just indiscriminately start popping a bunch of zinc, for instance. So in this case, there was plenty of zinc in the vitamin, and copper deficiency is correlated with cardiovascular disease. So it's something to keep in mind. Now, taking that much zinc in the multivitamin and not copper could have a causal relationship, because I mentioned if you have a copper deficiency and you're taking extra zinc, and knowing that not balancing out zinc with copper can have that effect on cardiovascular disease, you're kind of setting yourself up for some failure there. So that's something that I would absolutely consider. And also the content, the form of copper that was used in that supplement was, I believe it was here, Cupric, was it Cupric Oxide? Yeah, they used Cupric Oxide, which can't be absorbed by humans. And they use that because it takes up less space in a tablet. So vitamin companies used to use Cupric Oxide, and now we know that it's not absorbed by humans. And that's actually what was in this form of Centrum. I believe that particular multi has been updated since, but if it was, say, cupric acetate or carbonate, it would have been fine and it would have been absorbed, and it would offset the fact that they were taking a bunch of zinc. So that's something I would consider. Again, does that mean that, oh no, then John's saying it's a panacea if it has copper and zinc balanced out in the right forms? I'm not saying that. I'm just saying that that's a limitation in this study that they failed to mention, and they should have. So, as I said, using that form could have a causal relationship, and we know that. Now, they ignore other evidence that demonstrate in this review multivitamins, minerals having other benefits, such as inhibition of stress. Now, that's not the easiest thing to measure sometimes. You end up with some of the survey data. Energy levels, improve in pregnancy. Oftentimes, if any of you know somebody who's been pregnant, they've probably been on some form of a multivitamin, for good reason. They do that because they want to ensure against any deficiencies. So the take home here, guys, is that there's never a case closed, this is it, we're done, blah, blah, blah. And for those researchers to say that is not very scholarly or scientific. Again, it's antithetical to science. You don't say things like that. You don't say the debate is over, the case is closed. That's nonsense. You could say, hey, based on the evidence we have today, we think this is what our take is, if you will. But to ignore actual evidence within the own studies that they're actually looking at is not reasonable. Now, the motivations behind it, I don't know. Inevitably, people think, well, it's a conspiracy where the pharmaceutical industry is coming after the vitamin industry because it's gotten too big and this and that. I don't know that stuff happens in the back smoky dark rooms where they all get together and meet up and say, hey, let's screw these guys over. The vitamins aren't a little thorn in our side anymore. They've grown and become bigger. I don't know that to be true, and I don't want to invoke any kind of conspiracy theories or anything like that. Is there a monetary thing to be gained from that? Yeah, sure, of course, but I tend to not think that that's the case here. I really think that, at least in my experience, when I've dealt with some physicians, not all, again, all of something is not one thing. I don't tend to subscribe to that, but I've dealt with some doctors and talked to them and stuff and challenged some of them, and quite frankly, some of them don't like being challenged. And when it's on the grounds of science and evidence, this is what I think and this is how I feel and I'm digging my heels, and that's not a way to do things. And also MDs specifically, they're not specifically trained in nutrition. I spent a couple weeks in medical school, so it doesn't make them experts on the fact. But it doesn't mean that they can't independently learn more about it, of course. So I'm not saying, again, one thing is not all of everything. So point is be skeptical, ask questions. Compared to what? What studies did you review? Which ones did you ignore? What were the limitations of the study? As I said in the second one, the limitation was, hey, the dose was too low. That's a pretty big limitation when we're talking about it. So if you're going to make this big claim that enough is enough, and that's, I think, also, I will say that some of the motivations behind doing something like that is to grab headlines. I think they know that. They know it's going to be read on the news because a lot of people do take vitamins throughout the world. So if you say something provocative like that, it makes news. That's the way to do it. I personally wouldn't do that, give up your ethics if you're trying to be a scientist. I don't quite understand that type of motivation. But I think that is a likely motivation. It was the same with the prostate cancer study and fish oils. You know, remember that doozy that was out in the news that omega-3s don't, or was it cause prostate? I don't even remember to say it had a causal relationship with prostate cancer. Never mind the fact that, or didn't prevent. I don't remember exactly, but we did a video on it and it's jumbled my head. But I do remember this specific thing that they didn't bother to check whether or not the people had prostate cancer before or after taking omega-3 fats. That's kind of a big deal, especially when we consider the fact that omega-3s are thought to be healthy. So therefore, if you get diagnosed with prostate cancer, maybe then you take omega-3s. So then that was all over the news, and of course people went and they ran with it. So again, when you see these big headlines, ask questions, be skeptical. Again, I'm not here to just sell you vitamins. I'm not here to tell you they're a panacea or anything like that, as they're sometimes set up to be. So, and that happens on this side of it sometimes too, to be clear. There are some wild, ridiculous claims made by people in this industry that need to be called out as well. And this isn't to invoke some kind of middle ground fallacy where you have to be here or here. It's just that you need to look at all things and ask the proper questions. But hey, I hope this was helpful. I'm going to post the research below if any of you guys are looking to get to it. On the Annals of Internal Medicine, this one will be free, the actual review. You can read it. But the actual studies, you'll have to purchase them if you want to buy them. I think they were $20 is what I paid for them. So, hey, maybe it was a waste of money. So, wasting of money. I'm just kidding. So, if you guys have questions, post them in the comment section of the video or blog. Happy to answer them. Also, you can check us out at facebook.com/bestpricenutrition. And if you like the video, please do so below. Thank you for watching.